Hey Church Street Youth, we hope you're having a great week as you go back to school, or if you're someone that's been in school for a little while, we hope your semester's going well. We're starting a new series called Sunday Recap, or at least that's what we're calling it for now. If we come up with a more clever name, we'll let you know. But the point of this series is for us to take time during the week to look back at what we learned and discussed on Sunday. And there's a handful of reasons we want to do this. The first is if you aren't able to be with us one Sunday, maybe you're sick or you're out of town, this is an opportunity for you to stay plugged into our community and know what it is that we're talking about and studying. The second reason is so that if you need a refresher in the middle of the week to remind yourself of what we discussed, this is a place for you to touch base and remember what we learned about on Sunday. And the last thing is so that families have an opportunity to be studying this together as a unit. If you would like to spend one night of the week during your week talking about this at the dinner table, or if you want to touch base on Saturday before we return to church on Sunday, the whole point is for us to make our content really accessible. We have decided as a group that we want to pursue Jesus intentionally this year. And the way for us to do that is for us to set aside time to be with him, to learn about him, so that we can know him more fully. And this is a way we feel like we can do that. So, today's Sunday recap, the first one, is a chance for us to look back at what we discussed during Sunday school. We are doing a series during the month of August called A Sacred Season. And this is based off of teachings and podcasts and articles from several different authors. And today we're going to talk about a visual from the book Traction. This visual is talking about how we prioritize our time and our energy, and how we shift the way we use our days to grow our faith. So, I'm going to grab a couple things for a visual. If we look at this jar, we can say that it is full. There is no more room for rocks of this size. However, what if we choose something that's a little bit smaller? If we use these pebbles, we can see that it wasn't really full to start, but now it is. Would we consider this all the way full? Yes, if this is all we have to work with. But what if we choose something even smaller, like sand? When we add sand to this mix, we realize that there are even more spaces that hadn't been filled. And so we use this visual to think about the way we spend our days and our lives, because ultimately what we do on a day-to-day basis, Sunday through Saturday, is what does make up our lives. And we can see that what we put into our schedules affects everything else. So now we can consider this full. However, if we were to do this in reverse, use the same amount of materials, a cup of sand, half a cup of pebbles, and several huge rocks, but we put the sand in first, the rocks would not all fit. Sometimes that's the way we approach our lives. Rather than putting in the things that matter most first, the big rocks, we kind of let our lives happen to us. And what we do is we start with small things. We allow distractions to fill up our time. We aren't intentional with what we do on a day-to-day basis, and we fill our life up with sand, then pebbles, then rocks, rather than the other way around. When this happens, a lot of times we end up not having time for the things that matter most, strictly because there are only 24 hours in the day. So, our challenge during this study of a sacred season is to identify the rocks in 3 categories of our life: our faith, our home/personal life, and our school life. It's important for us to remember that we have one sacred life, and these are all just parts of the whole, rather than seeing our lives as categorized into a bunch of different boxes. It's all one box with different parts included. So our challenge for this week is to take a little bit of time to consider what rocks we want to identify in those 3 categories. We're calling this a sacred season because our life, much like nature, operates in seasons. It doesn't always line up exactly with winter, spring, summer, and fall, but it does line up with events or different transitions and rhythms. So we're calling this a back-to-school season. Maybe that started for you in mid-July. Maybe that started for you yesterday. Maybe it goes all the way till fall break, or maybe it goes to your first big event or test or football game. Whatever it looks like, your back to school season deserves to be recognized and identified. And when we spend time doing that, we have a better chance of prioritizing what matters most. When we look at our season and then we claim our rocks, we can figure out what God is calling us to do and how we want to use our days. There are two pieces of scripture I want to leave us with as we think about this sacred season. The first is from Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8, followed by verse 11. And it says this: "For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to cast away. A time to tear and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace." And the first part of verse 11 says this: "He has made everything beautiful in its time." This back to school season, whether it feels full of joy, full of fear, or somewhere in between, God has still made it beautiful in His time and in His own way. And so we finish with this brief verse from Hebrews chapter 13, verse 8. And it says, "Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever." We give thanks because regardless of our season, regardless of when it starts and when it ends or what it might look like, Jesus is the same no matter what, and He deserves all our glory and honor. We hope that this Sunday recap is going to give you a place to refresh in the middle of your week, to draw you back to who Jesus is and who He has called you to be, and we can't wait to see you again this Sunday.